Thank you, by the way. Thank you so much for this help.
Yeah, Aca-Media is on the- there's no masters, I believe, so yeah, so it's PhD program and finishing up my.
Is the input gain on that mic pretty good or?
So
I'm just curious.
I think, well, that's a good question. I suppose we'd have to test it out, but,
I have another one.
okay,
Preamps, which will just give like a 20.
okay.
Is that a condenser mic or?
I don't know. The tech stuff is not my strong suit, so,
Sometimes they can be a little quiet.
okay.
I mean, we'll see, like won't have color. I mean, it'll sound okay if you boost it.
Mhm.
You won't have. Just have a pretty flat waveform, or really wide.
Pretty flat, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to figure out the different YouTube channel now. That was unfortunate. I didn't think of that.
But so yeah, I think it's
Sure. So yeah, what I scheduled a YouTube live session YouTube live session in advance and sent a link out, but now I realize if I'm pushing it from Zoom, it creates its own separate one. And so, yeah, I think I just need to send out this other link.
Oh.
Smart. Yeah. Yes, very good thought.
I see you, Chris, but I don't hear you.
Yeah.
So it was like completely different. Okay, I think you're good. I think you just had to turn the phantom power on. So
Can you hear us now, Michael?
Indeed, I can.
Sweet. All
Okay.
right.
is this sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you should be okay.
Now I start Audacity and I'm just gonna. Where's the? So I don't see the H4 in here. Restart. Try the old restart. The old restart works every time.
It pretty much does.
Okay, so we are recording on our end. We got that going
Awesome.
now. Okay, and then the only other trick, Michael, is I have to change the YouTube link because the one I scheduled for YouTube Live, I forgot we got to route it through Zoom first and it creates its own link.
Oh, okay.
I tweeted that out. Let me see, I can put that on Facebook too. So that's the only other twist. Otherwise, I think we're working.
Right.
Fingers crossed. Okay, let me this and then get on my phone and start furiously sending around the new link. Pardon? I just tweeted it out on Aca or on Aca_Media on Twitter. And then also if you go to the old link in the descriptions, it has the new link. Okay, I'll go check that again. Wait, delete that.
Test. Test. Up. Okay. That's good.
Oh, I didn't. I wrote new YouTube link and I didn't put the link in.
Mhm.
So. Okay, I will reply to you, Juan, with the link. And then this.
I don't hear you.
What's that? You talking to me? Can you hear?
You talking to me? I can hear.
Okay, all right. I thought you were talking. Didn't know who
No,
was talking.
I didn't say a word. I thought there was somebody else in the room.
Ah,
Okay, I think you're good. You just had to turn the phantom power on. So
oh, that's the YouTube.
Can you hear us now, Michael?
That's the YouTube. I'm sorry. That's our YouTube.
is this sound good?
This is us 10 minutes ago. Yeah. And now
It's like
everyone
Memento.
was going to hear us. Okay. Let's see. Brain function. Aca-Media. And at worst, we record it here in the room and no one outside of here hears it. But we're going to edit together as a separate episode. So
Recorded live in front of a studio audience.
exactly, yes. Well, and then our producer, Todd,
Live
said,
on tape.
Yeah, he would add in, laughter. If you don't laugh at our funny jokes, he'll be able to edit in that we're actually very funny. Okay, I think that's good. It's so funny because I'm just like, I'm looking at the YouTube and Andrew is sitting there and I'm like, whoa, that's weird. Right, and then for this, we will put pin on, there we go, and pin Michael. So Michael is now. So we've got you on the screen there. Oh yeah, that's right. You can see yourself.
I can.
Okay, I think we are like just about I think we've got the tech set. So all of our participants, let me tell you what we're going to do. So Michael and I will kick things off and do our usual preposition fun where I can never remember if it's society for, media studies, or of. And so we'll just do a quick hello. And then Priscilla will start us out. And so we'll chat with her about being president, and then how SCMS has gone. Next, we'll have Juan, Cam, and Eileen talking about their SCMS experiences. I will first play a flashback from 10 years ago when I had Juan on. It was his first SCMS, so we'll play that flashback and get his thoughts, and then I'll turn to you all. You all got questions in advance, but we just kind of let the conversation where it goes. We don't want to forget Michael over there. Pause occasionally, and I think it seems like so I think we're actually in sync. We had a weird delay when we tested before, so I think we're good there. But we get Michael in with when he has comments and questions, and then we finish with Chris and Kristen. And I should get everyone's last name and make sure I'm pronouncing everything right, which will be just conversation about basically podcast studies and making sense of what we're all doing here. So I think that's it. Does anyone have any questions? Like I said, we'll be recording it live here, and then later we'll edit it so you can swear if you want, and we'll bleep it later or not bleep it. We've sworn on the podcast before, so that's fine. So let me get everyone's name. So Priscilla Ovalle, is that how you say it? Ovalle? Okay. Ovalle. Okay, and then Juan Llamas-Rodriguez, Cam Brown. And I think I'll let you each say what you'd like to say about where you're at and that kind of stuff. And then Eileen DiPofi. And again, that was, I remember yesterday you were like DiPofi, whenever. Did you have one you prefer? DiPofi, okay. Which I'll probably get it wrong now, but that's fine. Oh yeah, Michael, we got Eileen here. I don't know if I
know.
Yeah,
I know. It's pretty great.
And then Cwynar, and Kristen Leer. Sorry about that. Okay. All right.
I'm going to adjust one thing before we start.
And then I guess, there is the YouTube people could probably put things in the chat there. I don't know. We'll see if anything, I'll try to keep an eye on that, but I don't know.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
A color temperature adjustment.
All right. Okay, good. SCMS retweeted our new link. So we've got the. All right. And thank you, the others, for coming. Hello, I haven't seen you. I haven't seen you, giving you a big hug. Okay. And y'all are welcome to, if you want to ask questions and, join in, you're welcome to do that. Especially a nice small crowd, we can have some interaction. I'm going to go ahead so we don't forget. I'm going to start my Audacity recording. And we'll just let that go in the background.
Okay, I'm recording on this end too.
Okay.
Just for me.
All right. I'm going to get, well, I guess we have to wait 4 more minutes because I said, we'd start at 3:15 on YouTube. So, there I am 5 minutes ago. Me shut down some of these things. Okay.
I apologize in advance if there are sounds of a dog freaking out or
No, that's always
barking or howling, or it's been really, really warm here. So things are like going crazy outside. And today it's been really muggy and it feels like there's a thunderstorm coming, which adds to the persona of energy coming from the dog.
Yeah. Well, I think we had snow here yesterday, so that's getting to South Bend on like Monday, I think. So
Nice.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
We'll have a good April snow. Two more minutes. Countdown. 2 more minutes.
And I will just say, before we start rolling, if I like disappear because of, and I put up like a technical difficulty sign and I come back with a Negroni 2 minutes later, it's, don't hate the player, hate the game. I am 2 hours ahead of you guys, so.
True. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Right here.
All right. Let's see. Let me send out one more tweet with the new link and then okay, that is sent. Get that out of the way. Brought lots of batteries. I want to run out of batteries. Okay, I suppose I should be for the YouTube part of this. I should be screen. Yeah, I don't know what's gonna look like. We'll worry about that later. See what it looks like later. What matters is the sound, right? Is a podcast, the audio that matters. Okay, you about ready to go, Michael?
You got it.
Okay. Yeah, it occurred to me, because we always start out with the music, and I usually literally say music, 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 and we didn't.
I think what you say is music, music, music.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. It's 3:15. We're gonna start. All right. We'll use that music. That'll be even better. Even better than what Todd Thompson can compose. No offense, Todd.
Yeah. Watch your input levels. It sounds like it's distorting a little bit when you lean right in.
All right. Got it. Thank you for monitoring that. All right. We ready? Music, music, music. All right. Welcome to the Aca-Media podcast, live on the scene at SCMS 23 in Denver, Colorado, but also live on Zoom from South Bend, Indiana.
South Bend, Indiana. You know what? It's going to be like one of those live ER episodes that are like kind of weird and train wrecky, but kind of fun.
Yeah, but you watch because a train wreck could break out at any moment. So so fingers crossed that we have a train wreck then, because then it's even better.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be better than the Sound of Music thing or, one of those horrible musicals.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Here we go.
We're putting on a show here. Thank you. We've got some folks in the room, so thank you all for coming. We are trying to send this to YouTube Live. If it works, I have no idea. So if you're watching on YouTube Live, that's fantastic. I think you can maybe put things in the chat. I'll occasionally look there. I'll probably forget, but feel free to put questions in the chat.
I'll keep an eye on the chat too. So
okay, great. Yeah, go for that. And so it's me in the room, Kristen Becker, University of Notre Dame, and then Michael
Kackman, also at the University of Notre Dame, but in a different place than you. It's just uncanny.
The magic of technology. So yes, so I am in the concourse of the Sheridan downtown in Denver, Colorado, where we have been conferencing for now 4 days. We started on Wednesday. And this is the last of the panel session. So this is wrapping up the conference. And we chose this slot because we wanted to use this as a point of reflection to sort of think about what we all just experienced after not doing this for 4 whole years. So we've got an interesting lineup of guests to reflect on all of this stuff. First of all, we went straight to the top. We've got the president of SCMS who's going to chat with us about her experience, both at this conference and then over the last few years as SCMS president. And we'll give you a little glimpse into how the board works because I'm secretary. So we'll just have a little chat about how things work on the board. Then we've got longtime listeners will get a real thrill because we're going to flash back to 10 years ago when Juan Llamas-Rodriguez was at his very first SCMS. And guess what, folks? We've got him back 10 years later to see how he looks on it different now. And then we've got a couple of new grad students or newbies coming from grad school to their first SCMS. So we'll just have a big conversation about what that was like from the veteran perspective and then the kind of rookie perspective. And then we'll finish up with a reflective conversation about podcasting and podcast studies and what it means to have this kind of an audio culture. And so we've got, again, a pairing of kind of a veteran and as she called herself, a baby scholar. So we've got Cwynar, who's there basically with the start of the radio, music, and podcasting studies SIG, and then someone who's just beginning that journey. So we've got some really interesting pairings here. Anything to add? Have I missed anything, Michael? Or are we?
No, that seems good. Let's get going.
Okay. All right. So I would like to invite to the stage then Priscilla Ovalle, president of SCMS. So, woohoo.
Right here.
Yeah. And we'll, and Michael, you can let us know if, you know, or actually sit on this one so we can share a mic, but let us know if we, you know, if the sound isn't ideal. All right. So welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Yes. Yeah, we are finishing up our first SCMS in person in 4 years. What are your thoughts about how everything went? I mean, you know, a year ago we were, you know, because of course a year ago we had a cancel or not a cancel one, excuse me. We decided to move it online. And then this one, you know, we were saying, okay, we're going to go this in person. So like, what were you thinking about coming into the conference and how has the experience gone the past few days?
Yeah, you know, I'm so happy. I'm happy to see everybody here, to be in rooms with people, to see, you know, just to be in the liveness the live in-personness is just really incredible. And I feel like the energy is there, right? There's a different energy. I feel people are excited to be meeting new folks or seeing old friends. And so that's been really exciting to observe. And I just wanted to give a huge shout out to, first off, Vicki and the programming committee who did a fantastic job of like just putting all these panels together. And also the organization, the structure. I think that, you know, our first time back, you know, we had a lot of time to reflect on things that had worked in previous years and things that could be improved upon. And I think that with that time, we put together a really great program with events in the middle of the day to kind of break it up, making sure people had time for lunch. So I think that we were able to employ some really exciting, you know, useful things into the program that I think made it possible to reconnect or to make new connections with people. So that was really awesome. And of course the staff, right? Like they're constantly behind the scenes doing all the things. And it's been great to see all of their fruits, you know, all of their labor come to fruition. And of course the board has been sort of guiding that all the way through. And you know, then people are here. People have submitted their work, brought it to here, brought it to Denver, and have just made all this possible. So I think for me, it's been really exciting. And I hope that that is true for people that are here experiencing it, especially people experiencing it for the first time in person. So if I can, you know, if our new folks are having, you know, a good experience, if our queer and trans folks are having a good experience, if our, you know, marginalized folks are having a good experience, if our longtime veterans are having a good experience, like that's for me that's what I want. I want us all, the intergenerational connections to be made and people to be here together. So I'm hopeful. I feel like that's happening, but I really hope that is that's my hope, and I get a sense that is really happening.
Right. Well, to that point about, thinking about the marginalized, this one thing I wanted to acknowledge, like those who couldn't be here, right? And I think that's really important to acknowledge, whether it's because of precarity or health, geography, environmental concerns. And so as a current board member, I can attest that comes up in our conversations a lot. And I think that's something that is important for people to recognize. And this is, I wanted to move into that idea, basically how the board works. And I thought this would be a good example, kind of a useful point for our listeners to think about, like when we next meet, which will be in June, future conferences will be on the agenda, right? Now we have the next few that are scheduled, and because of, contractually with hotels, we're booked into those, but we'll begin what will end up being a years-long conversation about what happens in 2027. So I thought we could kind of talk about that process of how that kind of conversation works, right? And that will be your final meeting as the president, right? And so what does this look like? And I'm asking you, even though I have been there and experienced it, but like, what does that look like when, okay, that's on our agenda, what happens in the board meeting with something like that, with thinking about like 2027?
Yeah, so I mean, the good thing, I try to have a positive spin on all the crappiness that we've had to endure over the past couple of years. And the challenge, of course, was how do we meet our financial and contractual obligations and then build on that. And so what I'm excited about is that we have the 3 years set, right? We know we're in Boston, we know we're in Chicago, and then we don't know after that, right? So we have time to start thinking, to start planning, to start researching all of the things that are going to need to happen if we want to be able to pursue a hybrid or a virtual option, which is something that the members have been asking for, something the board has been taking very seriously. But even with all of the technological changes that have happened recently, it's still not a clear-cut process, right? Like there's still no model. And just thinking back to the pre-conference, right? I'm really excited about the fact that we now have virtual pre-conference and an in-person conference, right? This is our first year of actually doing that. And I think it's a model that could really be beneficial ultimately in terms of helping people find their place at SCMS. But even that, the platform that we had relied on for 3 years now to do that work has gone away, right? They've shuttered their operations. So I think it's just a good example of how we're looking down the road. We have the opportunity, we have time on our side here to be able to like think about and plan and figure things out. But things change so rapidly that even with that time, it's still a little bit unclear how we can proceed. So I'm looking forward to taking that opportunity to figure out how that's going to look, and working with board members and committees and volunteers to hopefully get a plan started. And then hope that there'll be enough longstanding, platforms and organizations that can help us do that work in a reasonable way.
Yeah. And I think that's, and basically what you've described there is what we do as a board. And so we all sit together, and there's there's 11 voting members maybe, and then a handful of other non-voting members, and then staff members. And so we sit around a room, and the most eye-opening thing, or the most beneficial thing for me, I've been on there now about a year and a half as secretary, is learning from everyone else. Because there's, I have a particular type of institution, and then we have people from, R1s to, small liberal arts college. We have now an HBCU member, and like things that I never have to think about at Notre Dame, and things I wouldn't have thought about come up in the room, and or people of again, different identity issues, of things like I just wouldn't have thought of. And so it's like the ideal of a notion of why diversity and inclusion is important. And so I think that's been really gratifying. And so these questions come up, and someone's like, okay, what about this? And someone's like, well, wait a minute, there's this, you got to think about that. And so it really is, and that's what we're supposed to do, right? We are the micro version of SCMS, trying to represent everyone, and it's not easy, and there's so many factions to represent. But I found it really gratifying, and especially how much we take that very seriously and take it to heart, about what we are trying to do for everyone, but recognizing there's so many different constituencies we're trying to represent.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's been so incredibly beneficial, and something that I've seen in my time on the board, is the now consistent placement of a precarious labor organization member on the board, right? So just that's built in now, that's baked in. And so now we have somebody who's always going to be really helping us think very clearly and carefully about what it means to not have maybe the institutional resources and support, or even that institutional connection to be able to support, the travel and the time that is required for coming together as a community at places like this. But I think you're exactly right. Like, I have learned so much as a board member. I have just learned, it's just been a real joy, even at its most challenging moments. It's been such a joy to be thinking together and working together and really working for a common goal, which is like, how do we make this the best place for our members and all of their needs, right? We can't do all the things. We're not, we are at the end of the day a scholarly organization, and there are constraints that we have. We don't have, an endowment or anything like that. We don't have we have resources, but we don't have all the resources. And so just being to hear members' needs and trying to put that into like some kind of strategic plan that we can build towards, that's been just really exciting to see. And I wanted to just one sort of say, like, point to the cyclical nature of being on the board. Like, time, I don't know about y'all, but time has been like really, it's timey-wimey for sure, right? Like, it's just like, I have no sense of what yesterday versus 2 years ago was. But there's a rhythm to the academic year. There's a rhythm to, and similarly, there's a rhythm to the board, right? So you were talking about the June board meeting. That'll be my last one presiding as president, and we'll start to see the new leadership come in. But the thing to know is that, like, we're already going to be working on the next conference, right? Like, June is, you don't forget, like in August is when all the proposals come forward for seminars and papers. Then there's a pretty quick turnaround time of review by the programming committee. And then, everybody gets notified. So much happens in such a short period of time, so far away from the actual conference, that I think it's just a good reminder that, I came in really wanting to do all the things and like fix all the things, and then realizing, oh, wait, there's so much just day-to-day stuff that has to happen, and institutional change, as we know, is really slow and challenging. And even with people that are motivated to make strategic interventions, it's long and hard, right? So just being able to just recognize, okay, this is a long-term project. This is something that we're all coming together and we're doing as much as we can at the same time as we're making sure people have timely notifications of whether or not they'll be able to present their work, and to do all of that volunteer labor behind the scenes to make it happen. So I think for me, it's just a sense of time and a sense of community that is all in support of our larger membership community.
Yeah. I had one more question, but I want to see if anyone in the audience has any questions. Like I said, there's a YouTube chat. I don't know if there's anything there, or Michael, if you had any questions you wanted to ask.
I'll jump in with something. I imagine there's a kind of built-in kind of a structural tension between keeping things central Midwestern in the US, because it allows you to put the conference at an affordable hub for airline travel for people in North America. But of course, what that means is that it's more expensive for people internationally. And that's a constant struggle to sort out. And so I'm just wondering, are you thinking about revisiting the idea of doing a European or another try at an Asian conference, or is that still a ways down the road?
Right now, it's a ways down the road. Only not from lack of desire, but I think just practically speaking, the thing that we're hearing right now, obviously, our members that are based outside of North America have been asking for us to think more globally about location. But I think right now, the thing that we're hearing the most is, options for some kind of remote connection, right? So I think that right now is where the priority is, especially because we have these next 3 years already lined up and committed. So for us, I think it's really, how can we, is a hybrid model going to be within our reach, given the fact that we're a mid-sized organization, right? We're too big for smaller locations. We're too small for bigger locations. And so we are in this kind of awkward position, just as the size of an organization, to travel as broadly as we might like. So right now, what options exist for our member to serve our members, either in terms of hybrid or remote options that would then allow for all of us to connect wherever we may be located. So I think think that's really where the board's putting its future thinking energy at the moment. And again, just the limitations of travel anyhow, and the size of the organization. It's always going to be an issue for us, whatever city we would find ourselves in. So I think right now, really thinking to the hybrid, to the virtual research and exploration, that's where the energy is, I think, going to be placed after we complete our obligations through Chicago.
Sounds good. Makes sense.
And as you mentioned, you are nearing the end of your term as president. The June meeting will be your last at the helm. Before then, you shifted to past president, so you get to stick around with us for another 2 years. And the way it works, if you don't know, you're president-elect for 2 years, president for 2 years, and then past president for 2 years. And so you stick around basically so we benefit from your expertise being passed down. And we've had the expertise of Paula Massoud for the last 2 years. And then we'll have Vicki Johnson moving into your seats after June. So I wanted to finish then with reflections you have on like goals you came in, like when you decided, yes, I'm going to run for SCMS president, what kind of goals, intentions, hopes you had, and then looking back, how did things play out in actuality?
Well, I didn't plan for a pandemic, so there's that
Right.
piece. But I think one of the things that I learned is that I came in with the idea that I had some kind of tangible goals, like fair use is something that's really important to me, and something I think that we, as a organization, we really want to sort of make sure lives on in some capacity, so that way it can, that we can do the work that we do. And even though that's very US specific, it does have repercussions globally. So I think that there's a way that, that for me was something that I really wanted to focus on. But at the end of the day, what I ended up realizing, and of course, because I think it was in my first year as incoming president that everything shut down. So it really changed our plans. And what I realized was, okay, there's actually, we're trying to do all these things, and we have all, what I realized, and this was me putting on my producer hat, my community builder hat, right? Like that was really what motivated me to run for this position, is because I just wanted to help people do the things that they do, right? We've got such great ideas. We've got such excellent community of scholars and artists and activists here, that I really wanted to make sure that we could just keep doing the things that we're doing and they're doing and we're all doing. And the pandemic really, it's terrible, obviously, but what it did highlight is just the how valuable time and our labor and our energy is, like physical energy and like mental and emotional energy. And so what I ended up realizing, that the thing that I'm hoping that I will have done with my time here is to help support the infrastructure that helps people do the work that they're doing, right? So one of the things that I've been trying to focus on, and one of the things that we've been able to do, and we'll be talking about this June, is a new support structure for committees, so that they can do the work that they need to do based on goals that the board has set up. So one of the things that I would like to I guess my hope, what I think I will end up having sort of put into place and help continue on is some kind of internal institutional support, so that way the work that starts in 1 year can live on and continue and build and accumulate over the years, by just something as simple as having an archive for what the committee has done, what committees have done in previous years, so that every time we have new people coming in to those roles, they have something to build from, and they can continue that work and continue on in new ways. So those were the things that I, that was my pivot, right? From like a very specific thing to a more infrastructural, like how can I help people do their work more humanely? So those are things that I think the board has always been wanting to do, but that was my, coming out from outside in, having never served on the board before, and then coming into this role, that was something that I thought I could contribute. And, the pandemic just made it more immediate, of an immediate need for us to just be mindful of what people are doing, all that labor that people are putting into the organization. But the thing I learned the most is how passionate everybody is, right? Like even, one of the challenges that we face as in any kind of leadership position is just like when people, like complaints that people have, right? Like things that people, like somebody sees an issue and they're going to let us know. And, sometimes it's hard to get that feedback, right? It's because you want to hear like, you're doing a good job, but that's sometimes you hear that, but most often it's like, well, you could have done that a little better. And so I think one of the things that I have just sort of like recognized as I hear those things, it's like, these are people that are really invested. These are people that are really passionate. They're committed to what we do and how we do it. And they want to see it thrive, and they want to see it grow and be something even more exciting. So I think what I've learned is just that we all want to be here. We all want to be together. We want to do our work. We want to be, good citizens of this community. And so, I'm looking forward to being able to continue to play that role in the backseat, as a sort of like, a non-voting member. That's another thing about being a past president. I no longer have a vote,
Right.
but I can, offer the, that kind of institutional knowledge and that kind of history that will hopefully help Vicky as she comes into the presidency, Vicky Johnson as she comes into the presidency, and JD Rivero as she comes in following Vicky. So, I'm looking forward to just sort of playing a supporting background role.
Yeah.
And in this next phase after this last June board meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. And as secretary, I want to say I love you as president because you keep things moving. And you also, at the end of each section, you say, let's summarize. And so when I'm taking notes, I'm like, oh, thank God she's summarizing. And now I can like write down what was actually said. So thank you for that helpful, you're good at like Robert's Rules of Order and all that kind of stuff. So even that stuff you're good at. So.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And, it's a heavy lift, the secretary, because you have to make sure that, that's our roadmap, right? So the secretary role, for those of you that are interested in board positions and leadership positions, that's such an important role because it's where the action items get documented. It's where we basically kind of continue on, and it makes timey-wiminess tangible. And so, yeah, thank you for all of your work. And I wanted to just say one last thing, is that, on the website, sometimes, and like any website with a lot of information, it can be hard to navigate, but there are ways for people to find information about like nomination processes. And the nominating process include, there's a form for it. There's a nominating committee that basically wrangles all of that stuff and then puts forward names for the board to consider for various roles. But there is a form that we all have access to as members where we can nominate a person for, these leadership positions, board positions, and then that includes self-nomination. So those are all things that, it's something I just wanted to share for people that are interested in getting more involved.
Great. And I think I didn't even know that. So that's good to know. I've learned something.
I just double checked it to make sure I wasn't like making it up, but
Right.
that is a part of the form. So yeah,
Right.
it's there. So.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
President.
My pleasure.
All
Thank
right.
you all.
Okay. All right. So next, we've got 3 guests coming up. And so Juan, Cam, and Eileen, if you want to come up here and situate yourselves behind, and someone can sit next to me, and then the other 2 can sit around that mic, and we'll test to make sure. Michael, you can let us know how the sound is once we get started with that.
One thing that I'm noticing that's really, really impressive about this conference is the 2 connector lanyard badge arrangement, which is it's a very classy badge.
Yes, it is.
Easy to read, good, clear information.
Yep.
And then it doesn't flip over.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. You don't.
This thing now.
The famous flipping over problem. That's right. I hadn't even.
So you don't end up with those really, at least not quite as many of those really awkward. Oh, hi.
Right. Yeah. All right. So our next segment is going to begin with a flashback. 10 years ago, we interviewed Juan Llamas-Rodriguez, who was sitting right next to me. He was attending his very first SCMS. And so we did a segment where he was our newbie, and then Heather Hendershot was our veteran. And so we were kind of talking about ideas like what, we wanted to have some people on to talk about what the last 4 days have been like. And so we remembered that one and remembered Juan, and we thought, like, let's get Juan back and see how things are 10 years later. And then we've got a pair of other folks attending their very first SCMS. And so we'll see what their thoughts are. We have to begin with a clip, though. I have a clip of Juan from 10 years ago. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. And mainly what came up, this is episode 3. So if anyone wants to go back to the archive and listen to the entirety of Juan's experience and Heather Hendershot's experience, this is episode 3. We were very young. We were a baby podcast then. But the theme across your segments was you were overwhelmed, right? Which is not surprising. So here's about a minute of Juan talking about being overwhelmed.
It was too big. I think I did feel like the time was really big, and I guess being overwhelmed with many people, not really sure if you know anyone's class, if you can start a conversation with someone. So that's something that everyone probably goes through on their first time. I am looking forward to speak at Aca-Media, and actually going once, I feel like the second time I'll know more people. So that's sort of feeling of inspiration will slowly dissipate. So I came back, and the Monday, 3 of my colleagues just like, how was it? And I was explaining everything. and everyone's wide-eyed, so cool, we need to go next time. But I think everyone's trying to scramble to create their own panel, and have a chance with everyone going next time. So I am really looking forward to that, and I will try and keep going. If not every year, it's every other year.
All right, so that was 10 years ago. So thinking back on that now, Juan, how did how have the last 10 years been, first of all? And then how have the last 5 days gone?
Oh my God. I can't believe it's been 10 years. I was listening to that clip this morning and I was like, oh, that's so cringy. But
Well,
yes, the last 10 years have been a lot. I feel like that at that point I was an MA student, and I was like a baby scholar and just like wide-eyed and everything was big. And since then, I was the grad rep, so I was on the board for 2 years. I was the grad rep for a SIG. I was the chair for another SIG. I've been on the committee for choosing the papers for the conference, and on 2 different award committees. So I'm like, oh, well, now I've seen like how the sausage gets made from like 20 different angles. So a lot has happened in those 10 years, and I feel like I'm still young at heart, but apparently not as much. So I think I'm still overwhelmed, but in a different way. I think at that time it was overwhelmed with like, I don't know any of these people, and I don't know if anyone want to talk to me. Now I think I'm overwhelmed with like, oh, I know a bunch of these people, and I want to talk to all of them all the time. And there's really only four days. So it's a different kind, and I think a way better kind of being overwhelmed. Partly also because this being an in-person conference after what, 3 years of not having them?
4 years.
4 years. Okay. After many years of not having them, it's also been all of that residual energy of people wanting to reconnect. A lot of people that we've met online that you knew from like just the face, and suddenly you realize they have a full body, and wanting to make those connections. I think having overwhelmed by how great it is to have the like ad hoc meetings in between the panels or like running the hallway. It's something that I think we tried a lot to imitate in the early virtual, and I don't know how much for others. For me, definitely was never kind of the same.
Yeah.
And that's really where you get to do a lot of the things. And now a lot of the things that I can do is introduce other people to each other, which has been a great experience, because now I'm just like, oh, I know this person and I know that you would really like their work. So let's get you two together. It's also been really exciting 4 days, because now in one of my new roles as co-associate area of outreach and equity for JCMS, my role is also to go to panels and hear exciting new papers in areas that have not been represented in JCMS from scholars who have never thought of themselves as, being able to publish in JCMS. So that also changed very differently how I would approach a conference before. I feel like I was looking through the schedule, and instead of circling like, oh, I want to see this directly relates to what I'm doing, it became more of like, let me explore and see what is out there, and how do I just like drop into a panel that I never would have thought of as well. So that's been really, really interesting as well.
Yeah.
And a very different experience.
Which is very much itself like a diversity project, right? Because we all have our blinders on of the thing that and particularly then if we don't have a diverse body of scholars, then we're all focused on the same thing. And so that idea of like, because that is like a conference idea of like, oh, pick something you wouldn't be interested in. And that's great. But a lot of us then feel the squeeze like, oh, I have to go to the thing I have to. And so that idea of like having your position be about diversifying itself becomes part of the function of that, you get to do that then, and sort of get 2 bonuses then from that.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, there's 20-ish panels at every one slot. So there's tons of things to see, and you can't do it all. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've had in my 10 years since coming as SCMS is actually like not feeling guilty about not doing it all, right? And realizing that, yes, there are 3 panels that are all happening at the same time that I want to see, but I'll just go see one, and I'll make sure to note who the people in the other panels are and what they're writing about, and keep an eye out for when they publish that, or if I'm really, really interested and I just could not make it, emailing them and just being like, I would love to hear more about this if you have the opportunity. And realizing, which is something that I just certainly did not know in my first conference, and as an MA student, is how willing people are to do that, and how excited they are. They're like, you're interested in this thing that I presented? Yes, I will share that. It's something that I think from the other side, you assume that you're going to be imposing on their time, or that they're going to think that it's rude that you approach them out of nowhere, but it's actually a great experience as well. So
Well, let me turn to then our two new participants. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. And so Cam, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about you and how you found your way to SCMS this year.
So my name is Cameron Brown. I go by Cam. I am a fourth-year PhD student at the University of Iowa. And I found my way to SCMS because I've been presenting at the virtual conferences for the past few years. And I remember being so excited for the 2020 conference, the first year that we were online, or first year that we were online, because I had presented at other academic conferences before, and they were like fine, they were good, and I learned a lot, but it felt like SCMS was like the place where my research was going to be like most well received. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks before, 3 weeks, however long it was like, oh, no, we're going to take a break, we're going to do this virtually. And so I was super excited to be here for like my first in-person SCMS experience.
All right. I'm going to follow up to get more information about that experience, but let me turn to Eileen, who I do know a little bit about she's a former student of myself and Michael's, but why don't you introduce yourself as if I don't know who you are?
Okay. Hi, my name is Eileen DiPofi. I'm a second-year MA student at the University of Southern California. And I'm going to be starting my PhD there in the fall. And how I found my way to SCMS. So yeah, I presented at like smaller graduate conferences. We have one at our school that I presented at, but I'd been hearing about SCMS. I mean, even since back in undergrad, like I would, always see the faculty ship out and then on Monday be extremely exhausted. To do that one day. And so it's always in the back of my mind. And then like a lot of people in my program have been talking about it. And so I saw people doing the virtual one last year when I was in my first year. And so everyone was like, you have to apply in August. So I applied and then here I am.
All right. And yeah, thank you for reminding us about the Monday, the post-SCMS Monday. So I'm interested in then two aspects of your experience. So first of all, just like the social aspect and navigating and the socializing, and then also you both deliver papers, right? And so what that was like to be able to share your work. So let's start with the social aspect. What was your experience of the conference like as a first timer? And, like thinking back what Juan was saying about how overwhelming it was, like, how did you feel about that part of it?
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. I think I had a little bit of an opposite experience just because I think very catastrophically in advance. So like in my head, I was going to get here and everyone was going to be mean and hate my paper. And like no one would want to talk to me until like I had really like stressed myself out about it. So then like getting here, it was such a relief because everyone was so nice and it was so great to be able to like I ran into you, Chris, like pretty early on. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is going to be really fun. So it's just been really great to be able to like run into older professors that I've had, but also like just sort of seeing like, oh, I've read their work and realizing like I could just introduce myself and people were really willing to talk. And like you were saying, like connect people and introduce people. And so I've been, really just excited and just invigorated getting to meet so many new people. And I'm really like relieved and pleased with how that all went. And I mean, I think it does help too, because a fair amount of people from my program do come. So like there's sort of that built-in support system. So I do think that has been really crucial navigating it. So I am really grateful for that as well.
Yeah, that'd be a good point. If we had someone here who's like the lone grad student in their program to come, that might be a much more challenging situation for them. Yeah. Cam?
Let me see if I can help out. Eileen, you might not have noticed an article that I wrote that you probably should have cited in your paper. I mean, I don't want to make a big deal about it. It's not a big thing. It's not a big thing, but there's like a whole conversation going on there that you're just not aware of. And, I just wanted you to know.
Yeah, no, this is what I thought it would happen. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that from afar, since we didn't have that here before.
You got it. I'm here for you.
Yes, exactly. Not as much. You got your official, not as much of a question as a comment.
Yes,
so,
all
right.
For that.
Cam? My experience was actually kind of similar from a different perspective. I'm going to be honest. I was stressed out for this conference. My poor boyfriend was helping me pack, and I was being so rude because my stomach hurt. I was so nervous. I felt like there was a lot riding on this conference for me specifically. I'm like entering the job market. I'm not like officially like hardcore looking for jobs, but I'm like, oh, this would be the year that the connections I made 2 years ago know me so well that they're like, oh, obviously I'm introduced to this person. I know like I know you don't know, but I know that there's stuff that going on and like they'll help you. You know what I mean? And so I like I said, my stomach was in knots. I was so worried. I was so stressed out. But getting here, my experience was almost the exact same. That it felt very relieving to be here and to like meet people and to be introduced to people and to like be a part of something that feels like not only am I a part of it, but it is so much bigger than like me or my work could ever think about. You know what I mean? Like it feels like an academic home now. And I've kind of described it like that because logically I knew that this was where my work would show up. But having come here to this in-person conference makes that like logic a reality. It like not only is like, okay, great, I can send my work to SCMS and I can make these connections for my professional career, but like I feel like I've met friends here as well. And so that's been really, really exciting.
Yeah. And it really does become that. It's, it's professional networking and personal networking. And this particularly, like my media industry students always talk about, our alum has this saying like networking is friend making. And it's that idea of like, you don't want to think of networking as this clinical thing. It's really about making friends. And that's what this is about then, which has both that personal payoff, but that professional payoff, right? And that becomes, the people you're gonna, one of your friends starts an edited collection and is like, Cam, you be good for this, right? And that's how all of that really, really flowers. And then also really like your comment about it feels like a home. I think that's one thing many of us veterans have struggled the last when we haven't had that as a place where, and particularly, and again, I'm from a big grad program, University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's like seeing all my Wisconsin buddies and all that, like it just, that really is almost a balm, to make you feel like you're, and especially because like our jobs are so stressful. I mean, you mentioned like getting back Monday and everything, and particularly the one other thing I was going to offer, like the conference has been very late this year. We're sort of like mid-April, and that's been hard because I'm also, oftentimes it's over spring break, and at least over spring break, I don't have to worry about students emailing me, and I'm getting like all the student emails. I taught a class, I did a Zoom class on Wednesday, and that's like a lot. And so it's felt very stressful. But also then everyone else is in that same kind of boat, right? And we kind of share the war stories. And that's also something that I feel a real strong unity that's beyond just, your little scope at your school. Just jumping at any questions anyone has, or Michael, any questions? Okay. So last question then, what lessons do you think you'll take forward to next time? I presume you want to come back, especially sounding like your experiences. So why don't we start and we'll then end with our veteran again. But so Eileen, any lessons or thoughts you have going forward?
I think maybe like an intention or goal. I think I was very scared to ask questions in panels, but I think now sort of having done it once and seeing that it like people aren't responding negatively, that people really like are grappling with questions and really want questions, and now being on the other side of it being like, oh, it's really great to get questions. And so yeah, I think next time I want to push myself a little bit more in that. So I think that would be my biggest takeaway. But I think also just not coming in super stressed, like knowing that it's like a really wonderful generative environment, and I'm excited to return.
Yeah. I think I'm still to this day nervous when I raise my hand and ask a question. There's just that like I don't know. And that's always like kind of just part of my personality. So I've always felt that. The other thing is this stress doesn't entirely go away. I was really nervous before my presentation today. And this was stuff I knew backwards and forwards, especially because I've been just working on a proposal about this. So like I knew everything about it, and still like I had to take some deep breaths and drink some water because I was really nervous. And and that's always one of my big bits of advice to students is like, don't let the nervousness make you nervous, right? You're going to be nervous. You're going to have anxiety. You're always going to feel intimidated. There's probably going to be some measure of imposter syndrome, that you'll have to some degree. And so it's going to be there. But you also then, the more you do, the more you get comfortable with it. And particularly then as you get to know more people, and it's not then, some, a famous scholar up there, it's your friend, right? Who you just had coffee with. And so you do feel more comfortable than raising your hand, essentially. Cam?
Yeah, I'd say that this, maybe an intention is a better way of describing this sentiment than a lesson, But this was a real affirmation that like trusting my advisors and my mentors is the right thing to do. I was not only introduced to a ton of people from or by my advisor, but his instruction along the way was things like, oh, hey, you should put together a panel. You should like submit a pre-constituted panel, email so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and ask if they want to be a part of it. And I'm like, no, no, are you joking me? These are like capital N names in what I'm studying. I absolutely not. And then I did. And everyone was super generous and super helpful and very, very excited about it. Then I got here and I presented that panel. And again, there were capital N names in the room. And I like finally recognized someone after about 5 minutes of being like, who are they? And I was like, I don't belong in this room because like this person is here like listening to me. And then all throughout the day, those capital N names came up to me and were so encouraging and were so uplifting. And they were so generous with their feedback and their thoughts that I was like, okay, like this is like, you know, my advisor, Al Martin, I was like, Al's right. He like, shocker, he's right about everything, but like, Al's right. Like, this is the place to do it, like taking that step and introducing yourself to the people that you're like nervous to introduce yourself to, or like the people that you don't feel like you need to be in the same room with because they're so great and you're so starting, was the complete, you know, lie that I was telling myself. And that was a lot of internal pressure I was putting on myself. But going and taking that step and like literally taking a step forward to somebody and saying, oh my gosh, hi, like I actually did that with Andrew at the like TV and radio SIG. I was like, you're Andrew Bottomley. I was like, I wrote a review for your book for a class and it was like really helpful for me. And it was a really, really wonderful experience to get to like be there in that and like to experience that form of community at the same time.
Yeah. There have to be some jerks here, right? Like there's somebody's got to be a jerk. Oh no, Michael, you're not a jerk. No. You know, because there's stories of like, you know, but that's on the Whisper Network, I guess. Maybe not on the, we'll keep that on the secret podcast. Juan, any thoughts going forward then for your SCMS future?
Yes. So earlier I was saying that one of the advantages has been that now I don't feel guilty if I don't go to all the panels. I've also like realized that the conference can be multiple different things for different people. So I feel like at first I just thought of it as like I'm coming here to present my work and to hear other people's works. And that is definitely a central part of it. It's also, as you were mentioning, meeting up with friends from grad school who are now at different stages and, you know, catching up on their life events and where they're at now and what's been going on in their life. I think that's important too. Meeting with publishers at some point when you're like trying to publish a book, meeting with new scholars that you yourself want to expand that network. And I think the big lesson is you can't do it all in the one conference. So I think I very purposely was coming in to this conference, the first one as one of the editors of Outreach, to be like, I'm doing that. That's the main thing that's going to take up some of my time. Then the second thing is going to be meeting up with all the people I haven't seen in 4 years. And then the others I'll try to do as well if there's some time, but there probably isn't because there's only so many hours in the day. And increasingly I need to sleep more hours as well. So knowing what, I mean, that can change from year to year, that in another year, it'll be like, no, I have a new project and what I want to do is come here and present and get lots of feedback on that. So that will be the focus. The priorities will change from year to year. And I think realizing that and being strategic about how to manage that has been one of the best lessons so far.
Yeah. And then also is probably a good suggestion as far as like controlling the nerves. Like if you feel like you have everything that you have to deal with, you get overwhelmed. And then thinking like, here are my 3 goals that I'd like to accomplish. And even in terms of this came up in that sheet of advice I had where someone said, you know, just plan if you're doing a big mixer, you know, plan to just talk to 2 people, like pick out 2 people to talk to. And so you don't feel like, and especially when you see all the capital N names and you're like, oh man, I want to talk to all of them, just like focus on like, let's get started with 2. And then maybe those 2 will lead to others, but just like trying not to put too much pressure on yourself. And especially like the ideal. And I guess, you know, another truth of this is we hope this is a long ride, you know, precarity in academia being what it is, you know, that's the really difficult thing where you don't know what, kind of support you'll get to go to the next conference. And you could say like, I'm going to go to the next 20 years of SCMSs. And, you know, you have to be in the right position or whatever. And like, so those things are also difficult things to think about. But, you know, the ideal is that you do get to go on a regular basis and kind of build up that store of knowledge and experience. Michael, anything to add from afar?
I think just remember, like, everybody there is, they're all nerds. And their social skills are probably not as good as yours, and are just as nervous and excited to have a chance to kind of get back together in a room with people and talk, you know.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. It does not need to be a freak out kind of thing. It's just a really good opportunity to have conversations with people. In the introduction to our anthology, our Craft of Criticism book, Mary Kearney has this characterization of kind of thinking about scholarship as showing up at a party, or showing up at a dinner party, and everybody shows up at a different time, and everybody brings a different thing, and you don't talk to everybody, and everybody has kind of a slightly different experience of it, but everybody contributes to what it is, and it's a little bit different because of the participation of every single person who shows up. And so it's like this like living, breathing, kind of organic, evolving thing. And no single person can control it, so it's not like it's your fault if it doesn't go in the direction, you know, that you want it to. But it also has a life of its own, and it's going to continue after you leave the room too. And that's a good thing. Like, that's a really, really good thing.
And that's all offer one observation about this particular conference. There were like notable absences and a lot of panels where, you know, someone couldn't make it or something like that. And I think there's a bunch of different factors. There's not one factor. I mean, we're still in COVID, right? And I think there's a hesitation. And if you're feeling sick, you don't come. There is the fact that, again, it's middle of April and things come up and we're very busy. But also, I do think like we have to remember how we do. So like, we're talking about this idea of like, what lessons do you take away? And so like in 2019, I had my lessons, and then 4 years went by and I didn't have another conference. And so I think we're all kind of relearning how all of this works, and getting comfortable with it again. And that's going to be, again, also a work in progress that will be affected by, you know, whatever happens next with the evolution of COVID. And then, as you know, Priscilla talked about, the idea of in-person and hybrid and online or whatever will be next. Like, those are also things we're just figuring out how this all goes and how it's supposed to go, and remember how it's supposed to go. So good thing we have our 10 years ago, you know, our flashbacks to previous versions. We have that to return to. Thank you so much to all three of you. Really appreciate your insights. This was a really fun conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we got one segment left. So Chris and Kristen, you can come on up and situate yourself however you'd like. You can have one person next to me, and then one person gets the that mic there.
Does it matter which one?
Whatever you want.
All right.
Okay, so we have here, and I'll let you introduce yourselves and tell a little bit about yourselves, but the intention of this one was because we are a podcast, and we wanted to reflect a bit on, you know, podcasting, the state of podcasting and podcast studies. And so we turned to the RAMP SIG, which is radio. Is it radio?
Audio, media, and podcasting.
There we go. That's it. And so, and asked if anyone wanted to kind of chat about podcast studies with us and kind of reflect on the state of that, and especially the evolution. As our previous segment talked about, we have this sort of, you know, combination of old and new coming together with that. And here we have then someone who was with the, was there when the idea for the SIG first started. And then we have a young grad student. So another sort of combination of like the long scope and the more recent one. So why don't you introduce yourselves? Chris, you want to start?
Sure. Yes, I'm Chris Cwynar, assistant professor of communication at Trent University up in Ontario. And I guess I've been coming to SCMS since 2010. 2 2011, I suppose, actually.
Hmm.
And so it's been nice to see how radio and audio media has really evolved and grown over the course of that time.
Yeah, I want to dig into that with you. Kristen, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, my name is Kristen. I'm wrapping up my second year at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor as a PhD student in their communication and media program. This is my first SCMS. So while y'all were talking about stressing out, I was like, all right, deep breaths before I come on here. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about podcasting studies, since I, like what you mentioned before, I'm a baby scholar around that. So take everything I say with a grain of salt.
All right. So Chris, and you had mentioned to me, you were there when Bill Kirkpatrick was first circulating the Radio SIG petition. This was actually at the Flow conference in 2010. So can you take us back to that? Like what were you hoping? Why did you want to start that SIG? What were you hoping to kind of forge within SCMS for this area of study?
Well, to be clear, I mean, I want to say I wasn't really involved in the starting of it. Later, I did serve as a grad student representative and a co-chair of the SIG, but it was really Bill Kirkpatrick and Alex Russo, Michelle Hilm, Cynthia Myers, people like that who were trying to carve out a space for radio at that time, before podcasting, at SCMS to make it a little more visible and make it easier for a community to coalesce around that. This was before the explosion of the mid 2010s, I guess, and so there weren't that many then, but it was a really useful initiative because it allowed things to kind of come together. And for me as a young grad student then, it gave me a community within the broader entity and made the conference a lot more approachable and rewarding for me. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah. And that's the, one of the key roles of SIGs is to create sub-communities and, kind of alliances within that. And so let me turn to Kristen then. How have your scholarly interests aligned with the SIG? Like what makes you want to be part of the group?
Yeah, so a lot of what I'm focusing on in podcasting studies is looking at and investigating the racialized voice, specifically podcasters of color, and seeing how they negotiate their identities when utilizing and participating in podcasting spaces, because podcasting is not just a audio format. What we're seeing with podcasters is that there's a lot of digital labor that comes with it, especially around social media, marketing, financial, and time restraints as well. And so when looking at SCMS and seeing that there was a SIG for radio, audio, media, and podcasting studies, the podcasting part was obviously an immediate draw. But what made me really interested, as you can see with kind of like the mission statements and even the panels, is that podcasting still has a lot to grow within SCMS and just in academia right now. And so I feel like I was drawn to it because I want to continue to expand podcasting studies and show the legitimacy around that, especially since it's creating a lot of fruitful spaces for marginalized voices, marginalized communities, specifically on topics that are often neglected or overseen in academia and in the public, where podcasting can actually be a host for a lot of that.
Which is really interesting to think of then in terms of the idea of the SIG starting in a place where you're all studying radio. And then, podcasting is coming in now. So I wonder if you could both reflect on that, like the place of this SIG radio and podcast studies within the SIG and the space of that kind of study right now. And so, Chris, you have more of the kind of long scope on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, radio, Michelle Helms used to call it kind of the repressed, media studies, because it was often, literally invisible, but also kind of invisible within the context of the conference and media studies and like that for a long time. And so podcasting as an emerging medium has really brought kind of audio media back into the mainstream discourse and back in, a lot more attention. In fact, it was only recently that the SIG was renamed to incorporate podcasting. And there was debate, should it just be the podcasting SIG? But of course, there's so much more going on, but it speaks to the prominence of podcasting and the interest in it right now. So it's been great because it's attracting a lot of people, a lot of younger scholars and people who maybe wouldn't have come to the radio SIG are now drawn into radio and audio media and podcasting.
Right. And Kristen, we were talking earlier and you were saying like you see there are important differences we need to acknowledge between radio and podcasting, and that so to kind of honor what podcasting studies is as a unique format is really important. So is that something you say?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be ruffling feathers with this, but
let's take things up here on the podcast.
Yeah, and take everything with a grain of salt. I'm still new to the area, but when I got into podcasting studies first, I didn't even know it was an area field. A lot of it was radio studies. And so a lot of people try to bridge this link between radio and podcasting. But what I would like to argue, just like with film and television studies, is that respectfully, we can have the umbrella, but we also have to divorce and understand that they are very different ways of engaging with the media, especially in an audio format. And so branching it or grouping it all together can be very useful in helping radio and podcasting get the spotlight that it deserves, but also recognize that the way that we're conceptualizing podcasting, the methodologies that we're trying to approach when analyzing podcasts is very different to radio. And I can provide examples with that with some of the research I've been doing as well. And so that's kind of like the little hot take. And also, even if we look at, I'm trying to be mindful too, because I know the SCMS president is here. But even looking at SIG, I'm very grateful for SIG for providing this space to talk about radio and podcasting. But even if you look at the panels and what the SIG has sponsored with the panels, there's very few papers on podcasting. And even too, when we look at what topics are being talked about with podcasting, there's even a panel talking primarily on populations that aren't marginalized. I know there was a lot of podcasts. I think the one panel that had a decent amount were focusing on like white women. And so I think we have a great opportunity but responsibility as well with an emerging field to set an example of centralizing marginalized voices and often voices and stories that are neglected in other areas of media.
Yeah. And that seems like, and I'm assuming that's something your work explores, like podcasting becomes a place where, ostensibly there are fewer gatekeepers, right, than something like radio. And so that becomes a space where you can kind of forge your own areas. Is that the case?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that come into my head when you're saying that. First, I would like to say that like oftentimes with podcasting, there's two lies that often are told in the general public. One, anyone can do a podcast. And two, podcasting is free. And both of those are white lies that oftentimes we see with engaging with podcasts. First off, it's not accessible. You either pay with your time or your money via subscription. So either you listen to ads or you're listening or you have to pay to get rid of those ads. And that's like for certain digital platforms as well. Take that with a grain of salt, but it's also not accessible to everyone, and not everyone can start because there's a lot of financial labors and time labors, especially on podcasters that don't have the privilege and stances to just up in arms, let's start a podcast, get a bunch of people together, and there's video and there's social media and they have a whole team and a marketing. And a lot of times the big podcasts, it's not just one person. Yes, it's the one person on like the icon and the vocal person, but they have a whole team behind the set, and not a lot of podcasters that I've interviewed or worked with have those types of privileges as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Can I jump in there?
Yes.
I am fascinated to see how many podcasts have actually become they're not just audio productions. I've had students repeatedly talk about podcasts that they like to watch.
Yes.
That's like a thing, right? And and of course, we're doing a visual, like we're putting this on YouTube, so we're participating that in some small way. And that is both really, really fascinating, right? Because you have all of these different registers and new kinds of information and different kinds of cultural material that you can engage with. But it also means you have higher production values, or at least a presumption of higher production values, and infrastructure and technology and all of that kind of, or a lot of that kind of really low tech elegance that comes from just producing audio media becomes much more capital intensive and labor intensive. And so it's fascinating to me that this is now a form that is popularly understood by at least a fair number of folks who consume them to be a visual medium.
Well, I think that also affirms that notion of needing podcast studies, right? And particularly then if you're not, and this was like, going back to that lesson of film and television, this assumption that like a film scholar can teach television because it's just, it's just on the small screen. It's the same thing. But, I see Melly laughing like that's part of the, you need to understand how these work. You need to understand the, industrial infrastructures behind them, the, cultural aspects, like all of that kind of stuff. In order to really understand how these work. And so I think that's, that itself is a justification for podcast studies as its own thing within and understanding how it's different to and shared some of these other media as well. Let's see, any questions from anyone else? Okay. So to finish up then, could you give some reflections on your conference experience then? So Chris, you said you've been going since like 2010-ish. So thoughts on how the past few days have gone for you?
Well, it's very enjoyable. I mean, for me, it's primarily a social experience. I do still go to some panels, but it's just nice to catch up with old friends. I mean, I'm back in Canada now. I did my PhD in Wisconsin, and so there are a lot of people that I really value. I don't see very frequently, so it's just lovely to see them, and it's generative. You get a lot of ideas, a lot of inspiration, and then you can kind of go back to your computer and your office and whatnot, and your books and get down to business. So it's always lovely in that respect. And people talk about it being big, but it's not so big that it's not that forbidding or difficult to get around and see people. So I think it's a nice size.
Kristen?
I've been enjoying SCMS. Again, this is my first time, and I think kind of like what the previous grad students were kind of talking about, it is overwhelming, not in a sense it was big, but you never know what to expect with every conference because it's very different each one. But it was an ability to engage with my cohort because they are pretty much all here too at the conference. So to be able to hang out with them, yes, in an academic setting, but also exploring a new place, which is Denver, Colorado. But then also too, like kind of what you were saying, it's really cool to network and get a lot of inspiration and ideas and motivation. I think the external validation, which we've kind of been missing with the pandemic, is really nice to where even if like, I presented once, but I go to other panels and engage and network. They're giving me ideas. They're giving me inspiration to continue up the good work. That sometimes if you're isolated at your computer for too long, you forget.
Yeah. And especially both of you speaking to that notion of the energy you get. And this is and again, I'm remembering, you get back from the conference and although you're exhausted on that Monday, you're just like, just so energetic, and it's tough to sustain that then because then real life hits and all that. And you kind of recede a little bit, but then ideally we do this again next year, or you have other conferences you can go to. And I think that's another thing of the past few years, the past 3 years of having that kind of taken from us. It makes it really difficult to get that constant, boost of energy that you can get from a conference.
If I may add, there's a pre-conference before ICA up in Toronto in May. We're both going to be there on podcast studies. So it kind of speaks to the maturation of the discipline, the emerging discipline. Like, and we've got some great books like Andrew's book, Sound Streams, that came out a couple of years ago, and there are others. There's literature gatherings. It's kind of beginning to cohere in that respect. So we're going to bring that energy from SCMS and take it up there. Awesome.
Excellent. Good plug. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kristen, Leer, and Chris Cwynar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And Michael, I think that wraps it up. We've got some thank yous. I guess thank you to Andrew Bottomley for providing some equipment for us and helping me troubleshooting. I was speaking of panic. I was like freaking out trying to get all this to work like an hour ago. And so thank you to Andrew for helping with that. Todd Thompson is going to help us edit this into an episode. So we'll be able to release this as a finished episode on our website. So thank you to Todd in advance for his golden years helping us out.
Thanks to SCMS for making space in the schedule.
That's right. Thank you to Leslie Lamont and Molly Youngblood and all those folks for making space for us. Thank you to Stephanie Brown as well from which school is she at? I can't remember the school that Stephanie Brown is at because she helped with us some of the planning as well. So thank you much, Stephanie. And Frank Mondelli at Stanford University. No, he's not at Stanford anymore. Man, I'm blowing this ending. Well, we'll fix this in post.
Stephanie is at Washington College.
College.
In out on the Maryland shore, and
you like to do your little accent, don't you?
Only a tiny bit. And yes, Frank has finished his PhD, and he just took a job. Can't remember what it is.
Yeah, I can't remember.
We're gonna have to clean this stuff up.
We got a lot of work to do.
Punch-ins.
Yeah, but at least the first hour was good. We're just falling apart here at the end. Everything else was good. All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for coming. And we'll see you next year in Boston. SCMS 24. All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Thank you. Really, everybody, that was great. Let me now turn off all the recordings and shut down YouTube. And thank you, YouTube. If anyone is on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. And let us know how that went, because I have no idea.
You had 2 viewers. Take me back to my community radio.
Yeah, there's one. Oh, wait, Margot. So Margot was, T-Mount was there at the beginning. She commented, "We love dogs." So that must be directed to you, Michael. Did she hear your dog or something?
She probably did. She probably did.
So at least we had one person. I can't shut it down yet because, of course, it's delayed by 6 minutes and Kristen is still talking. So we'll let that We'll let that keep running for now.
All right. I will sign off now.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. See
Sorry
ya.
not to not be there.